Welcome to the Glenn Mercer Show. You could find us across all your favorite podcast platforms. You could find us on YouTube, and please remember to subscribe. The show is brought to you by First Seed Foods. That's healthy, oil-free Indian food without the butter, oil, or ghee. It arrives at your door frozen, and you just have to heat it up. It's delicious. You get $10 off your first order using code GLEN10. My guest today is an author. I think he's a brilliant
Mhm.
photographer. He is the author of the book The Weight of Empathy. And he is an architect. And he is a first-time documentarian making a movie called Kinship. Lucas Spiegel, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Pleasure to be here.
Lucas, I just finished reading your book, The Weight of Empathy, and it is a beautiful book, both physically beautiful because of the photographs and beautiful because of the content. And it really seems to me the story of what it means to go through life with the extra sensitivity that some people have who care about the treatment of animals in the world. Is that how you view the essence of the book?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. Of course, my from my own perspective, it doesn't feel like a sort of extra sensitivity. That just is my default state. But yeah, I think probably many people, many listeners can relate to um, feeling a kind of weight of the world from seeing and hearing about suffering, whether it's animal suffering or human suffering. And so yeah, that's kind of the core of the book. It's a travel memoir. In 2016 and 2017, I spent 22 months traveling around the world, and so there's yeah over 100 photographs in the book from that trip, and uh, it focuses largely on my time volunteering and visiting animal sanctuaries in different countries. And then it's just around my own personal inner journey. I sort of left my career in architecture to go on this trip, and assumed that I would probably just go back to it. But after experiencing so much, understandably, it was quite transformative, and I really had to come to terms with what my role in the world is. Seeing, of course, I saw countless incredibly beautiful and uplifting and inspiring and eye-opening things, but also saw, you know, a huge amount of suffering and conditions that people and animals live in around the world that's really difficult to even see, much less to live yourself. So had to come to terms with. Um, so what's my role in there in terms of the any responsibility me and my choices have on creating those conditions of suffering, as well as where I'm putting my energy in terms of comfort and convenience, or some life path that is acceptable by my peers or family or society, or am I going to try and do what feels most meaningful and worthwhile, and sort of honors the experience of all those that I saw and met in my journey. And so yeah, that's kind of the gist of it.
You use the phrase the suffering footprint, that we all have a suffering footprint. What do you mean by that, and how does that affect your decision making about what to do with your life?
Yeah, this is a term that I learned from a friend of mine, Robin Singh, who is one of the co-founders of this animal advocacy project in northern India. Um, and I wrote about him and that place in the book, and actually went back this winter to film there for Kinship. But he introduced me to this phrase, and I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Everybody talks about a carbon footprint or an environmental footprint, but everybody also has a suffering footprint, and that is unfortunately just a fact of life. And as a longtime vegan, of course, I care about the suffering that my choices cause. But I, learned or realized long ago that it's impossible to reduce those consequences to zero. Um, Even, you know, having food transported to you, there are animals and bugs who die from getting hit by the car. Just walking around, we step on bugs, to have food produced for us. We have, people who work in on farms in the fields and grow that food, and there's some amount of suffering involved in sustaining any one of us. So I think that once we realize that, one, I feel like I've kind of have to take responsibility for what my suffering footprint is. That is, part of living in this world. And also, it becomes really clear that no matter how like good of a vegan you are, or how good of a person you are, or how kindly you treat those who are directly in your life, um, there are still negative consequences to our existence. Um, and and so there's no point in sort of chasing perfection. It's more about being cognizant of what those consequences are, what the trade-offs are, and trying to act as responsibly as possible. But in terms of one thing that I wrote in the book was something that Robin had mentioned to me years ago, talking about this concept. He said, if there is suffering in the world just in order for me to live, then my life is not mine alone.
Uh,
So just the fact that others suffer for me to survive and to have pleasure, means that I bear some responsibility for um, for the lives of others, for trying to reduce the amount of suffering I cause, trying to hopefully be a positive influence in the world in terms of others, being more conscious about these things, and also the flip side of that is trying um, to bring joy into the world. So at least for me, it's a matter of the amount of joy that I am able to bring into the world. I feel like I want that to at least be commensurate with the amount of suffering that my life brings into the world, just in order to live a baseline like ethical life, which is
well,
harder than you might think.
if the net
Yeah,
effect of your efforts is creating more vegans in the world, then I think you're bringing more joy into the world and creating less suffering.
yeah, I hope so.
One thing you write is don't get too attached to things going exactly to plan because they never do. That's advice that applies to everyone, but I think that's good advice to keep. Uh, does that understanding keep you from making too many plans?
Well, I've also found that you have to make plans regardless, which is, I'm also not the first one to come across this idea, but yeah, just because you're not attached to your plans, I've made countless plans, and even the successes, they didn't work out exactly how I planned it. So you have to be ready to take in new information, adapt to different circumstances, and improve as you yourself grow. And um, at the same time, you can make zero plans and look back in the blink of an eye, and 20 years have gone by, and you're like, well, I wish I should have, I guess I should have made some plans because I didn't end up accomplishing anything that I hoped to. So yeah, I think it's very important to make plans, and whether it's in my personal life or with these projects that I'm undertaking, I do a huge amount of planning. I have countless number of notes and spreadsheets and documents and everything to try and organize what I'm doing, especially with like filmmaking, because this is my first time and I have so much to learn. Um, just trying to
Well,
get a grip on it. So it's like a ton of planning, and at the same time, I'm like, well, I also know that a lot of things are gonna go sideways, or I'm gonna realize how naive my plan was once I, learn more. But you got to start somewhere and start taking steps.
well, I was going to say that one of the plans you have is making a documentary. So tell us what you can tell us about the
Sure.
documentary, which I take it is about half completed.
Yeah, at least the filming is half complete. So it's really like I said, I'm a first time filmmaker, so I didn't go to film school. I don't have a background of working in film. I have some sort of photography and videography experience, and have done just
Judging by the book,
edited.
Lucas, you're a brilliant photographer.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I do have like, an somewhat of an eye for a keen observational skills, and other things that are relevant to photography, and a sense of like design and beauty that I value, and so those things are transferable. I have some experience, at least shooting and editing, short like 5 minute videos, that sort of thing. Um, but really, I
Well,
came to
I'm going to
this.
interrupt here
Mhm.
to say,
Sure.
call yourself a filmmaker. You're making a film.
Thanks.
There was
I am.
a playwright named William Saroyan who wrote a play called The Time of Your Life. And there were producers who wanted to put it on Broadway.
Mhm.
And Saroyan said, great, I'm directing. And the producers said, but William, you're a playwright. You've never directed before. And he said, and I guess he used the pronouns of the time, he said, well, at some point in every man's not life, he hasn't been a director, and then he directs a play and he's a director.
Right.
So you're a filmmaker, sir.
Thanks. I appreciate that. It's something I'm learning how to deal with that like imposter syndrome as I go, as well as everything else. Um, so disclaimers about my
The
lack of
real
experience aside.
imposters, the real imposters are the ones who don't have imposter syndrome.
Sure, sure. So yeah.
You're halfway, but what's the subject of the document?
Sure. So it came about because I was looking at, I mean, the reason I wrote the book, aside from just to process my own experience, was, well, that's part of the reason I wrote it. The reason I published it was because it is also kind of call to action, and um, needs to get out there and get read by people in order for it to have any effect. And I was thinking about what is the next kind of project I can take on, again, to this end of maximizing the positive effect I can impact I can have in the world, particularly for animals. And yeah, slowly developed this concept that sort of builds off of my travel memoir, incorporates some of these other transferable skills, and developed this idea, which has now become in a film called Kinship. And it's a feature-length documentary. It combines travel and returning to many of these locations from my travel memoir, along with uh, trying to lay out a hopefully compelling and if not comprehensive, at least like global in scope vision for a world beyond animal exploitation, like a future vegan world, if you will, rooted in examples around the world of people and projects that are leading the way in that direction. And so really trying to trying to avoid anything that's too hard to watch. I'm not going to put any slaughterhouse footage, no factory farming footage in there. Um, I think that those things are really important to document and for people to see, but I think for one, most people will just never watch it. Um, I think the people who do watch it are typically very deeply impacted, and that's a really positive thing. But most of the people out there, I think, will actively avoid seeing any sort of factory farming, slaughterhouse footage, and they're still going to go about supporting it, even though they know in their heart that it's not good. And I think there's a lot of that out there if people are ready to see it. But I want to reach the people who do have this compassion. They maybe consider themselves animal lovers, and they're not ready or willing to, come directly face to face with what goes on for animals in the industrial food system. Um, but they would be open to a more positive, forward-looking message. So instead of looking at all of the things that we're doing wrong and all of the just moral atrocities we're committing as a species, um, trying to look at what are we actually working toward. And part of this is to do with my experience working on a ballot measure campaign here in Oregon that I find really inspiring.
What's the
The
ballot measure?
The current version of it is called IP28. End Animal Cruelty is the organization that's doing it. And basically, it would, statewide, it would remove the exemptions from our animal cruelty laws, which sounds very straightforward and a common reaction when, just canvassing the public about it is to say, like, why do we have exemptions from our animal cruelty laws? Like everybody agrees what constitutes cruelty. That's why we have laws against it. So why would there be
We
exemptions?
we have exemptions for the food animals, right?
Exactly. So there's a number of exemptions, and they allow people to do things to chickens and cows and pigs and goats, etc., that would be illegal if we did it to dogs and cats. Um,
Right.
Same practices, same same capacity for suffering and joy that our beloved pets have. And so it's very straightforward. It's a really fascinating way to engage people on that common, like starting with that common ground of like we are all agree cruelty to animals is bad, and we all agree what constitutes cruelty. We just need to make the law and our, views of animals and what is acceptable, consistent, like logically consistent with the evidence out there that says all these other animals are sensing, feeling individuals, just like our dogs and cats. So I found
So
it really.
is this ballot measure part of the documentary? Is are you
Not currently. We did a film in Colorado for a similar campaign that was to ban slaughterhouses in the state or in the city of Denver,
Mhm.
which was on the ballot. We went there because it was already on the ballot. The one in Oregon is still trying to get on the ballot. So yeah, we wanted to document something that was like already in front of voters. Um, but it's a long term effort, and the organizer David, he talks a lot about how the like women's suffrage in Oregon came about through the same process, through the ballot measure process. And so women got the right to vote in Oregon before they did in, nationally. But it took, I think, 6 or 7 times on the ballot over the course of almost 30 years for it to pass. So, you could easily look at that first attempt and be like, this is crazy. Why are you doing something so like radical? This is never, you're never going to convince people to, give women the right to vote. That's insane, and, probably got, 5% vote the first time on the ballot, but it's a long process. And so the conversations that I had with the public talking about this campaign were really fascinating. And, just to be able to go out on the street and have a reason, something to engage people around, that allowed us to have these like really nuanced, and often deep conversations about the fundamental nature of our relationship with animals was a really unique opportunity. And what I kept coming back to was anytime somebody would have like a really nitpicky like reservation about it, or many of the reservations that people might had, my response was always to like zoom out and think about it like, well, we don't expect this to pass the first time. We're starting this conversation, because um, the food system now, today, would be unrecognizable to someone 100 years ago, before the advent of factory farming. It would be unrecognizable. I mean, then that's just in that one way, in many other ways as well. And likewise, the food system 100 years into the future would be unrecognizable to us. And so knowing that it's going to be so different, that change is inevitable, I think it's incumbent upon us. It's the more morally responsible for imagining the most compassionate and just version of that future food system that, maybe a generation or two or three from now, um, and starting to take steps in that direction today. Um, because that change, while it's inevitable, the direction of that change is up to us. It is, we could easily sleepwalk into these projections of, meat consumption doubling by 2050. But that is a projection, that is not destiny. And so I think it's a different frame of mind for people to start to take ownership for the food system of the future, and the human non-human animal relationship of the future. And, instead of thinking about food decisions as a decision about the present, about, what's right in front of you, or even about the past, about tradition and nostalgia and, habit. Instead, I want people to start thinking about decisions around food in particular to be decisions about the future. And with every choice we make around food, we are building that food system, of the future.
Well, in the fantasy that this measure passed, would
Mhm.
this make animal agriculture illegal in Oregon, or would it only rule out factory farming?
It would effectively stop all animal agriculture. I mean, I think you can try to imagine uh, some version of animal agriculture that would be allowed, but I think, if it's banning, like artificial insemination, it's banning killing animals unnecessarily. And so
So if
that
people were
leaves,
raising chickens in their backyard and then killing them, they
yeah, you wouldn't be able to kill them for
wouldn't be able
meat.
to kill them.
So, and
So
it
that's
outlaws,
banning animal agriculture.
yeah, essentially. I mean, you could imagine like a small egg farm where, I mean, like some people that have backyard chickens who treat them
Right.
well and give them veterinary care when they need it and let them live out their full lives and eat their eggs. Like that kind of model you could sort of imagine on some very small scale, but it bans, killing animals. It bans, artificial insemination and all these things that are integral to, any sort of like commercial scale animal
Right.
agriculture, which is
So
like, it's very radically transformative. And at the same time, like I said, it's 100% in line with the existing consensus about, what animal cruelty is. It's just applying it to all animals as they deserve.
And has
Um,
the measure qualified for the ballot?
no, they're working toward the 2026 ballot, so they have about another year to get the
How many
the
signatures do you
signatures they
need?
need. They need like it's statewide, so they need to be safe. They're aiming for 150,000, I think. But if anyone who's listening wants to check it out, it's IP 28. That's short for Initiative Petition, so not super catchy, but yes, on ip28.org. Maybe you can put that in the show notes. But it's
Okay,
a
back
yeah,
to the
great
documentary.
organization. Sure.
Back to
So that was
back-
kind of some inspiration and really had me start thinking about it on these in these terms. And so I really wanted to, think about what are people's, I think largely people are compassionate. They do care about animals. They do not want to see animals suffer. And so what are, and all this information about how horrible factory farming is exists out there for anyone who wants to see it. So what are people's reservations? And I think at least the theory behind this film is that people think of veganism as a lifestyle choice, and in particular, they think of it as an isolated, like altruistic personal sacrifice. And they don't know that it really matters in the end. Like as an isolated act in the face of this massive industrial system, they're like, well, I don't want to be the one to make this like sacrifice and change my life when like the system's still going to continue. And so that's also part of the rationale behind, changing it from a consumer frame to a civic frame and being, like there's a lot of people who, for instance, this measure in Denver to ban slaughterhouses in the city got like 36% of the vote or something like that. Um, when the vegetarian population is maybe 5% in the city. So that means there's like 30% of the voters in Denver are in their personal lives eat meat. And when they show up to vote, they are happy to vote to outlaw slaughter. So I think there's a lot of this sort of latent support for the interests of animals, that I think can be unlocked when the framing is shifted away from an isolated personal lifestyle choice. And in this case, it's not just like changing how you vote, but it's about thinking of it as being a part of a joyful global shift in how we think about animals, how we live with the animals in the world. And that's something I'm hoping, and I hope that people are inspired in this direction when they see the film. That people are happy and more ready to jump on to a global, joyful movement toward a more compassionate future than they are to like make a isolated personal sacrifice. And so I wanted to show what all people are doing from many different backgrounds. And so so there's some very personal stories of how people's own relationship with animals became what it is. It's, people updating their traditions, their family businesses, their culture and their communities to be more in line with compassion for animals. It's about you know public policy change, and it's about food system transformation. So on all of these like micro and macro levels, and then from all kinds of different perspectives. So everything from uh, hopefully trying to line up talking to a like food tech company in San Francisco doing some really cutting edge stuff to remove animals from the food system, all the way to, one of my favorite interviews that we've done so far, which I'm so grateful for, is this woman, Lek Chailert from Elephant Nature Park in Thailand. And she tells this incredibly moving story of growing up in the jungle in northern Thailand in a small village and going away to a boarding school and being tasked with taking care of these pigs and having them taken away from her. And it just really uh, cemented this connection with animals that she had and this commitment to work on their behalf, which she's done beautifully throughout her life. Um, so it's a huge range. It's not a comprehensive global survey of everything that's going on by any means, but at least enough to capture this sense of the animal advocacy movement as a global in scope and not limited to, you know, the global north or, privileged white people in the US shopping at Whole Foods. It's there's these rich plant-based or largely plant-based traditions of cuisine and ethics in many parts of the world that go back centuries. And um, so yeah, just really trying to one have this like narrative focused, really intimate storytelling that really connects with people emotionally, builds empathy for farmed animals, and also hopefully gets people inspired to join this movement toward a kinder future.
Well, in your book, The Weight of Empathy, you go around the world, you travel the world for a couple of years, and you often stay at animal sanctuaries.
Mhm.
I'm just guessing, was it about half the time that you were staying at animal sanctuaries?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you befriended a lot of animal advocates around the world.
Mhm.
In this upcoming documentary, Kinship, you're returning to many of those same places and interviewing your friends who you got to know during your travels. Is that a good
Yeah, that's right.
share of
It's
it?
not, yeah, that's it's not all of the same locations, but there are a handful of the same locations. And people, I mean, this story about Lek and the pigs that she raised when she was 11 years old, I think. Um, this is a story that she originally told me like on a car ride from the sanctuary back to the city on my like last day there in back in 2016. Um, so there are these things that really stuck with me, these people and stories and projects that really stuck with me, um, that I really wanted to go back to and share these stories with the world, with a wider audience than just myself. And then there are other things that I've learned about since, and I'm really excited to go see for the first time. We're planning a trip to film for a couple weeks in Europe this summer, and one of the places we're going is to film with this project called Transformation in Switzerland, which maybe you've heard of, but it's this woman, Sarah. She uh, has a small animal sanctuary of her own, but she some years ago started this transformation project to help facilitate family farmers out of animal agriculture. So these are largely people who have small family farms, um, and for generations they've raised pigs or chickens or cows or whatever animal it is, and this newest generation they realize like there are deeply potent things about that tradition, about carrying on the family legacy, and at the same time, they never felt at peace in their hearts with like having to kill the animals. And I think that's true. I think a lot of vegans tend to sort of make fun of it when farmers say or when people defend animal agriculture and say, oh, the farmers actually really care about their animals. And of course, sometimes in some cases it is laughable. It's not the case of what's going on. There is like overt abuse on top of whatever happens systematically or systemically. But I think it's true that there are a lot of farmers who do care about their animals and they don't see a way out of animal agriculture. And so they have to rationalize it um, and cope with the situation as sort of a necessary evil as well as they can. And so she has actually helped over 100 farms in Switzerland leave animal agriculture behind and
Wow,
transition
she's helped a
to,
hundred farms.
yeah, which
That's
is
amazing.
incredible. So there's some projects in the US that are trying to replicate this, but I think mostly they're kind of in the pilot stages right now.
Yeah.
So I'm super excited to go and meet her and
How big a
one of
crew do you
the
travel with?
it's me and one other person,
You and one other
my
person.
yeah, my cinematographer. So it's
Uh-huh.
really lucky to find a cinematographer, director of photography here in Portland where I live, who is also vegan and really value aligned. And so he's got his own cinema camera gear that he's lending to the project, and he's working for a small fraction of his normal rate because he believes in the project. And so yeah, I definitely would not be able to do this project at this level without him. So I'm very, very grateful and lucky. But it's super shoestring budget,
Right.
combed through the budget and cut as many corners as I can where, we're sleeping on couches and, uh, uh, you know, traveling and doing everything as cheaply as possible to get this done, but without sacrificing the quality of it. But yeah, it's me and the cinematographer traveling to these places, and yes, super excited to go there. That's really this
And
transformation project, and especially considering how successful it's been with over 100 farms transitioning to either a sanctuary model or to plant agriculture is it's not an exaggeration to say it's the one thing in the world right now that gives me more hope than anything else. So
right.
I think it also is kind of the perfect thing to include in the film because it's all about changing this view that people have of veganism being a sacrifice and instead reframing it to look at all that we have to gain through this transformation in our relationship with animals, and that includes the farmers themselves. I don't think that, if we're being honest, I think yes, these farmers are important, their livelihoods are important, but if they have the option, if we as a society, as a species, have the option of producing food without having to like kill these animals that farmers care for, then that would be better. That would be better for them. Like, I don't think yeah, I think it's an incredibly liberating. It's incredibly liberating to be able to remove oneself from this violent relationship with animals. And I think that's the case personally. Like anytime I, think about it, which is often, um, I look at the whatever plate of food is in front of me for dinner, and I feel so grateful that like I am able to sustain myself to eat incredibly nourishing and delicious food without, you know, without there is some suffering footprint, but without like killing hundreds of animals a year, like the typical omnivorous diet does. And
Right.
that's not necessarily guaranteed. That's not a sort of a basic right or entitlement that I have. It is a privilege. It's a privilege that I have being born the person in the body that I have in the country that I'm in the family I came from, the community I came from, and most importantly in the time uh, in the modern age, where
But
there's
you were
so
you
much
were
available.
you were a nonconformist in the community that you came from and in the family that you came from.
Sure, yeah, somewhat, but
We could tell that you're a nonconformist by those pink
sure,
headphones.
that's true. That's true. But I mean, there's no guarantee that it's not destiny that this is the way it is. There's an incredible amount of luck as well.
There's luck in
There's
everything.
no like there's it's not a destiny that humans evolved uh to be omnivorous or like able to sustain themselves on a omnivorous or like plant-based diet. Um we could have evolved from carnivores and just been like, well, it actually is a necessary evil. If we want to keep living, we have to kill other animals to survive because we're obligate carnivores. If we like
Right.
evolved from cats instead of apes,
Yeah. Well, this is where the protein
So
myth comes in because
yeah, yeah,
they
sure,
need a reason for this atrocity.
yeah,
Um, do you narrate the documentary?
yes. It's still coming together. I was just talking with some other filmmakers this morning in a meeting actually, and people were discussing how with documentary, even if you have it goes back to having a plan and knowing it won't end up like that, but with documentary, for the most part, you don't necessarily know what it's gonna look like until you make it, until it's done.
Right.
And so with a grain of salt, the idea is basically to have myself as a kind of through line through these different stories. I'm certainly not like the protagonist. It's not like about me or my story, but I'm sort of a host guiding the viewer through these to meet these different people and projects,
And do
and
we
so
see you reuniting with some old friends around the world?
yeah. Yeah, so I am on camera and reuniting with these people and
Mhm.
revisiting these incredible projects and so that also includes narration. So I'm directing, producing, writing, narrating, and at the moment editing as well. So it's
Have you been learning
lot of
that
hats.
skill, or did you already have that skill for editing?
Um, I had limited editing skills, but I have done it before. So yeah, it's something I feel confident in my ability to do it, but it's definitely going to be a learning process in the beginning as I sort of pick up the speed and yeah, get more comfortable with it as like a storytelling tool, rather than just something a tool I have to pick up from time to time and just enough to get a little job done. So this is going to be a long project.
Well, if
But yeah, I
people want
enjoy
to
that
help
process
you,
as well.
I take it you're in need of further funding to complete the film. If people want to help you fund it, where do they find you? Where do they find
Yeah,
this
I
project?
definitely appreciate any support. We're getting pretty close to the kind of minimum viable budget to be able to finish it, which was not always guaranteed. So I'm really excited to be in that position. But we do have a bit of a funding gap, and anything we raise over that will go a long way toward getting it done at the highest possible quality and the shortest possible time frame. So yeah, you can go to kinshipfilm.com, and then we are to learn more. And then we are also running a crowdfunding campaign right now on Indiegogo. The shortened website address for that is igg.me/at/kinship dash doc. But probably easier to put that on screen or in the show notes than
Yeah, we'll put
to
it in the show
remember.
notes.
But yeah, but
And
just
do
that
you also
kinship,
have that Indiegogo link at kinshipfilm.com?
it's on my to-do list to put it on the website, which is now that I'm putting the website out there, I will get that done.
Okay. Now, let me read back to you some elegant words you wrote in your book. You wrote, the ongoing challenge is learning to stay sensitive to, um, and is learning to stay sensitive and empathetic, to nurture my soft heart, honoring its ability to keep me connected to others and fuel my passion for mercy and justice without losing my sanity in the face of widespread tragedy and apathy. Is there any sense of this ongoing challenge within the documentary?
Um, I think so. I mean, I'm probably not going to dive as deeply into that in the film as I do in the book. But again, I think that the way that looks in particular, um, uh, yeah, depends on how the writing process goes and the editing process. But yeah, it is, and yeah, so in insofar as I am a character in the film, I think it will be about those inner challenges that I have trying to nurture my empathy and compassion in the face of a world that is, not yet the world that animals deserve and is full of suffering and tragedy and apathy in many on many fronts. And so in as much as I am hoping that the audience is inspired, it is also a process of like reconnecting with these incredible people and projects around the world and keeping myself inspired and hopeful, and enough so that I can stay sane and continue to channel my energy toward being a part of the solution, instead of retreating from the world.
You wrote in the book about a vegetarian city that you visited.
Hmm.
I had never heard of it.
Yeah,
Palitana, is that right?
Palitana. Yeah.
Yeah, in Italy?
It kind of sounds Italian. It's in
Yeah.
India,
In
actually.
India. That's right.
Yeah, yeah,
That's right.
yeah. It
That's
does sound
right.
like it could be a
And
Italian name.
so tell us about that vegetarian city.
But yeah, it was a pretty interesting experience. I mean, it's just fascinating that the place exists at all. But I found it really valuable experience to visit, in part just to expand my own view of the range of contexts out there in the world. I think it's really easy for um, the people I talk to on this about this ballot initiative campaign, for example, many of them would say, "Oh, you're never gonna get everyone to stop eating meat. Like that's crazy." Or like hunting is such a fundamental like human right, as if these things are absolutely universal and not a part of their own culture and background and this particular moment in time uh, in our own little context. And so seeing all of the different ways that people can uh, arrive in a similar place of more compassion and justice for animals. And in this case, it is a fairly remote, small city in Gujarat, India, and it's a pilgrimage site for the Jain religion. And you may know, but the Jains are they're vegetarian. They and in India, vegetarian means no eggs as well. And then Jains have a very interesting version of this like philosophy of ahimsa or non-harm, which I won't get into too much. I'm not a expert on Jainism, but the I remember hearing even when I was a kid, just starting to get exposed to ideas of nonviolence and um, hearing about these monks who would sweep the path in front of them before they took each step to make sure they didn't step on any little critters that they might be in the way. And they even wear some like some cotton fabric over their face so they don't accidentally breathe in little organisms. They I think don't even eat food that has been left overnight because they don't want to kill whatever might be growing on there overnight. Like in some ways very extreme version of like veganism. And then on the other hand, it can lean towards a sort of dogmatic religious approach. For instance, most Jains still eat dairy, even though there's a huge amount of suffering intrinsic to the dairy industry, even in
How did they manage
India.
to excuse that?
Well, I
They don't
think,
want to eat bugs, but they're okay with exploiting dairy cows.
yeah, I think the premise is not just non-harm, but a focus on not killing. And so, in theory, you don't have to kill a cow in order to drink their milk, at least in some situations,
Of
in
course, not in the
some
way that the
practices.
dairy industry exists, but yeah.
Not in the US, not in, your
And I take it in India, they just let
not in India.
the male calves just go off.
Yeah, so in India, there are some places where they eat cows in India, but for the most part, well, it varies a lot, but for the most part, it is, often illegal or like effectively illegal to kill cows. And so, and also like a part of the like uh, majority Hindu belief system to not kill cows. But instead of looking at, okay, well, what is the modern context? What happens to these cows? Do we really need dairy? What are the alternatives? Is there a way that we can, meet these needs without hurting cows? Instead, it's just following the sort of letter of the law, which is why I say like a sort of dogmatically religious approach, um, which happens with, some Jains and Hindus as well, where they're like, okay, well, we need the cow to give birth so that she keeps lactating. But unlike the US, we can't send them to slaughter the babies to slaughter because we don't want to kill the cows. So they basically dump them on the street to fend for themselves. And so they can sort of say, like, my hands are clean, I didn't kill the cow. But of course, they, get,
Kind of a himsa adjacent, I guess.
well, it's sort of, out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
They're like, well, we're following the letter of the law. Never mind that these cows, die of malnutrition, of eating too much garbage, of, untreated injuries, car accidents, all of this stuff, because we dumped them on the street. So, um, yeah, I think, more and more people in from these backgrounds are starting to see like, okay, well, we do actually deeply care about um, minimizing harm to animals. And so even though dairy is celebrated in our culture and our cuisines, we're going to recognize that it is, ethically consistent to, take the vegan route instead, and start adapting cuisines and traditions. And so people are moving more in that direction. But yeah, it was very fascinating to go to Palitana, this Jain pilgrimage site, I believe originally, and maybe 20, I want to say 2013, something like that. I think there were some Jain monks who went on like hunger strike to bring about this policy of no meat in the city, and so it's illegal to sell meat. It's illegal to raise animals for the purpose of being slaughtered within the city limits. But at the same time, there's dairy operations there. There's, stray dogs and cows struggling on the street. There are, horses pulling carts through the streets, hot streets all day. So animals are definitely still exploited. Um, and so I think there are limitations to this religious approach, which is kind of why I try to, like in writing and in the film, try not to lean on these like religions that have these compassionate views because I don't think that like a sort of religious dogma, even if it's closer to my own values, is the way to ultimately get to the world that animals deserve.
Do you return to Palitana in the film?
I did not. But it's definitely a place that I thought about filming in. India is enormous. It is incomprehensibly diverse culturally and otherwise, and so um, and it's really hard to get around. So we spent like 5 weeks in India, but we still had to be very judicious about where we filmed,
So
and
where
it,
did you go in India?
we spent most of the time in the south. There was a primarily because of a vegan festival. There's a reforestation project in Tamil Nadu that was hosting this, I think, second or third annual vegan forest festival. And
Was
so
my
I
friend
think,
Silas Rao there?
yeah, I
Yeah,
think he presented at,
yeah.
uh, yeah, he was a very highly anticipated speaker, if I recall. Um, so yeah, this was just in January, or sorry, February. Um, and so there's about 1,000 people who came out to this reforestation project in
Hmm.
rural southern India for this vegan festival. So that was fascinating. We filmed there.
Did you meet
And
Silas?
no, I didn't have
Oh,
the opportunity to, fortunately. But
all right. Next
there's a
time.
lot going on next time. We also filmed in the south at a wildlife rescue center outside Bangalore and at a farm animal sanctuary in Kerala, also in the south, as well as a lot of like travel footage documenting all the good food, like which involved me eating all of it. It's just incredible food.
Now,
But
in the book, you go to certain sanctuaries. I believe one in Cambodia, where you
mhm.
meet elephants. Do you return there in the film?
Not to Cambodia, but it's a part of this network of sanctuaries run by this woman, Lek. So we went to film with her, and that was at their primary location in outside of Chiang Mai, Thailand. So they have about 100 elephants there, as well as, a huge herd of water buffalo, hundreds of dogs and cats, and many other animals.
Yeah.
So
What did you learn
incredible
from
place.
hanging out with elephants?
Mm. Elephants are fascinating. One of the things that really struck me was just, I mean, it kind of seems like maybe a trivial fact, but like basically that they have a comparable lifespan to humans.
Hmm.
And so I think it can be the any way in which another animal is different than humans makes it sort of harder to understand what it's like to be them, what their life is like. I think about, there's, for instance, insects. They are they are also animals. They have so many shared characteristics to us, and at the same time, they are extremely different. And then in the terms of lifespan, some of them, they might only live for a week or two as their like natural lifespan. And so it's really hard to understand like not just what it's like to be an insect, but what it's like to have a lifespan that's 2 weeks long. It's just hard to wrap your head around.
And by the
Um,
time you understand it, they may be gone.
exactly. Many generations of insects will pass before I have any understanding of it. But with elephants, like they have a lifespan that's very comparable to humans. And so, you hear about, one of the first elephants that I met there, um, Arun Rhea, one of the elephants I photographed and wrote about in the book. Um, I think she was rescued when she was around 40 years old and had been, basically her whole life had been exploited. I don't remember.
Working in the lumber industry?
I don't remember specifically offhand her background. The common ways in Thailand that they're exploited are in the, yes, logging industry, which is absolutely brutal. They basically take them out into these jungles. They chop down these massive trees and then, put a chain around them to like drag these enormous trees, back to the road, to harvest this lumber. And through rugged terrain, and it's just brutal day in and day out. They often will have their hips or legs will become injured and ruined. I mean, among many other things, but just brutal uh labor that they put them through. That's one. Of course, there's also the like entertainment and like elephant riding, elephant shows and sort of circuses, that sort of thing. Um, but they're these massive wild animals. So the only reason that they are able to exploit them in these ways is because um, they essentially break their will when they are babies. And I won't get too much into the details, but it's an incredibly cruel process of breaking down their psyche so that they become helpless and hopeless and feel at the mercy of the humans they're with. And that is the only way that they're able to get them to this place where they're these massive, powerful wild animals who will like let stupid tourists ride on their back, or they'll drag these logs through the forest or whatever it is. And so the point being, it was such a powerful moment to meet this elephant and hear her story. And I was turning 40 around that time. And so I could look back on my own life, the scope of my own entire life up to that point, and I could grasp that amount, or at least that duration of suffering, you know, of being exploited, and think of, okay, well, I can imagine how long that is to endure something like that. I can't imagine how horrible it is, but I can at least imagine that length of being subjugated,
Hmm.
um, relative to my own, at least the duration of my own life. And that was just a really powerful moment to see, um, and also just to see, the resilience of these elephants after suffering for decades of their lives. All they ever knew was, being exploited, being um, harmed and used and abused. And some of them they don't recover. I don't want to sugarcoat it. Some of them they end up at a sanctuary, and they don't know how or want to socialize with the other elephants or any humans for that matter. And
They essentially have post-traumatic stress syndrome.
exactly. And you'll see them, just swaying back and forth, and that's kind of what they do all day, every day. It's just they're, kind of irrevocably burdened by their experiences. But more common than that is, that you see these elephants actually being able to enjoy their lives, um, after so many decades of suffering, to see them just, going out on a walk into the jungle with Arun Rhea. And um, there was, yeah, just hearing her, like, the caretaker she was with giving her snacks, like segments of like sugar cane, and just hearing her crunch into it, just releasing all the sweet juices, and just seeing this like relaxation and just contentedness. and seeing her be able to explore her natural environment. There was this, palm tree, probably like a relatively small palm tree, but probably 20 feet tall or something, that she just knocks over with her trunk and like kicks apart into like segments, tears off the bark and just like eats this entire tree. And, like it was a magical experience to be able to be in such close proximity to such an incredible individual, um, and to see, after learning her story, to see her enjoying life, seeing her needs taken care of. It was really incredibly moving. Definitely stuck with me.
There was yeah, a place you visited, I might have been in Japan, where you came across people who believe that everything you eat has a spirit.
Mhm.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, this was another place in my travels that really stuck with me. Really would love to go back someday. But I don't know if you know about WWOOFing. It's
No?
the acronym stands for Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. It's basically a network that connects travelers or really anyone with organic farms around the world. And the typical arrangement is, essentially like 5 hours of work a day for room and board. And it's a really incredible way to travel sort of long term and sort of be embedded in the local communities, and to feel like you're not just taking from the local community, but you're also uh, giving something, and not just interacting with um, people in the sort of tourism industry wherever you are, but actually with local families. And so I did that for a good deal of my travels, initially as a way to travel on a small budget, but many of those experiences became some of the most memorable and worthwhile, cherished experiences of the journey. And so one example of that was this family in Japan, a vegan family, and they are a part of this community slash philosophy called Itadaki Zen, and it was really fascinating. I feel like there's got to be there's some amount of it that's lost in translation, of course. But had many conversations with them about their philosophy, about how their particular approach to veganism, and by approach I mean how they got there, um, and philosophy about it. And essentially, it was from this perspective of almost like this idea of like Buddhist meditation, of like self-purification, of getting to know oneself through like meditation, um, and essentially saying that you're trying to like connect with your own spirit in that process, and everything you eat has a spirit of its own, including plants, um, and uh, non-life forms like salt, I suppose. But you would say something like salt has like the weakest spirit of those things that you eat. Plants have some spirit, but it's also not especially strong. But then animals have a stronger spirit, and so when you consume them, that is a bigger disruption to your own inner spirit, and it makes this process of self-knowing and self sort of purification more difficult. And
When
just
you
yeah.
eat plants with whatever spirits they have, according to this philosophy,
Mm.
are those spirits ever nourishing spirits and good for you?
I mean, I think that is maybe open to interpretation. So
Okay.
it was a matter of translating like literal translation in terms of Japanese to English, and also a matter of translating one worldview to another worldview. And so I did my best to try to hear them, of course, with like humility of knowing that I probably don't understand perfectly what they're saying, um, but also trying to relate it to my own worldview. And I wouldn't say I would say I'm spiritual in some sense, definitely not religious. And so for me, the way that it made sense to me is, or I could relate to it, is in terms of like, if I know that an animal has suffered in order to get to my plate, and I eat that animal, I'm literally eating their suffering. I'm eating the result, the consequence of this cruelty and this violence, right? This violent act of killing the animal, slaughtering the animal. And that's literally becoming a part of me. That dead body is literally becoming my body. And I think if you are cognizant of that reality, then of course it's going to be harder for me to gain inner peace of any kind when I'm continually ingesting that violence in a sense. Um, and so in that way, even though my spirituality and my worldview and culture is very different from theirs, that's how I could sort of relate to it. Um, yeah, this idea that, of course, inner peace and by extension, peace in the world is going to come more easily if we are not consuming the product of violence.
Well, let's close with the concept of
Mhm.
home. You write about home in the
Mhm.
book. You get a little philosophical about it,
Mhm.
what it means to find a home, what it means to be home after traveling for 2 years. So let me ask you this: have you found home?
Mhm. It's still a concept that I struggle with. Yeah, it was very interesting coming back. People talk about sort of reverse culture shock when coming home after traveling. And there's some of that in terms of just, especially I've traveled many times to India, including this year, and anytime I come back, it's just shocking like how much space there is here, like the density in India is like literally 12 times as high as US, like population density. Um, so yeah, there's always like an adjustment, but more than that, it's a matter of like after all of these experiences and all of these different places, connecting with so many people in so many different cultures and countries and regions, um, in a way, on the surface, it's like, oh, now I feel like more connected with different people around the world. I read something in the news about something that happened in Mumbai, and I can think, oh, I can picture that place because I used to live a couple train stops away from that place. So in a way, on the surface level, there's this increased connection, but then I feel like those experiences also, and I'm sure is relevant to different contexts for different people, maybe, but um, these experiences are all like broadening my perspective, and it's so valuable that I feel like I have such a broader perspective than if I had just lived in my hometown. My little small town in Colorado where I was born. If I had just lived there my whole life, like my perspective on the world would be so much narrower. Um, but at the same time, when I come back, then it's becomes harder to connect with people there who, I don't want to sound derogatory, like they just have a narrow view, but like the world that they're living in there is like a little insulated, like from the rest of the world, and the like concerns that yeah, the concerns that are relevant in any one little place in the world, as important as they are for that context, it just leaves out so much. And so it can be hard to come back and feel like, people are talking about X, Y, or Z, that this seems to be like the most important thing in the world, and really it's the most important thing in this very, very, very narrow slice of the world. And so that feels like it creates some disconnection, um, where I'm trying to figure out, okay, well, this broadening experiences sort of make me feel like I belong less to the place that I'm from, um, and I'm less a part of that place or that community, and that can feel very alienating. So uh, I think from there it's a process of figuring out like what does home mean to me, um,
Well,
how
I think
important is
that's
it
part
to stay in one place.
that's part of broadening of life experiences. You become less
Sure.
of each place that you're from,
Yeah, absolutely.
each part of the past.
Yeah. So, of course, home then becomes not just the particular place and culture and community of where I was from or even where I currently live. It's, a matter of part of home is a distributed network of people, around the world who I care about and have become close with. It's the people in my life. It's the things that I care about, the values that I care about. It's my dog Rosie, and having her in my life, that makes me feel at home no matter where we are. Um, so yeah,
Do you take Rosie with you on your documentary
not
travels?
not on these filming trips. It would be a little much to make
Yeah,
sure she's comfortable and has all her needs met while trying to do this project. But
yeah.
I did uh, go to lived in Colombia for about 5 months, a year and a half ago, and took Rosie with me there. So we had
Okay.
quite the adventure.
So she's
Well,
had some traveling.
yeah, yeah, but I think she prefers to stay closer to home.
All right. Well, tell our listeners the websites that are related to your efforts. There's the weightofempathy.com for your book, right?
Yes, no, the just
Weight
weightofempathy.com.
of weightofempathy.com.
And then the film is kinshipfilm.com.
Okay. And people could also find your book on Amazon, right? Weight of Empathy.
Um, I think just from my website is the
Just
best.
from
It's technically on Amazon. I won't get into the details of why they're a pain.
right.
But yeah, that's
Okay,
just
so
to order from
find
the
Weight of
website.
Empathy, which I highly recommend. Find it at the
Mm.
website weightofempathy.com. And
And I'll
also,
just say a side note there. So it is a paperback book. Actually, I got a copy right here. So it is a large format, full color paperback. Um, oh,
yeah,
one of the elephant friends that I made. Um, but there's also an ebook version, and the ebook version is priced as pay what you want. So you can just leave it at 0 and download it for free if you'd like. Come back and leave a tip if you enjoyed it. But yeah, I want people to be able to access the book if they want to.
and go to kinshipfilm.com, where Lucas will soon put the link to the Indiegogo funding source.
Correct.
All right, Lucas, it's been a pleasure getting to know you. Best of luck with all your efforts.
Absolutely. It's been a joy. Thank you so much.
Take care.
All right.